If you are an old school gamer, then the words System Shock should immediately spark some fond memories. This seminal cyberpunk first-person action-adventure role-playing game became the stepping stone for renowned spiritual successors such as the Deus Ex and BioShock series, and the inspiration for games like Arcane Studios' Prey. The title also spawned a sequel, System Shock 2, which is regarded by many as a masterpiece, an originator of branching character and narrative paths, an establisher of deep RPG mechanics, and often ranks highly on lists of the greatest games of all time. Unfortunately, the System Shock series never really garnered much commercial success, but it amassed a cult following in the years following release. So you can imagine how pleasantly surprised many System Shock fans were to find that the game would be receiving a modern remake treatment by Night Dive Studios, which fully acquired the rights to the System Shock series on November 2015. The System Shock remake project launched its Kickstarter campaign on June 28, 2016, and within 24 hours, half of its $900,000 pledge goal had been met. By July 9th, 2016, the project was fully funded, and by the time the campaign was over, it managed to raise a whopping $1.3 million from over 21,000 backers. A big part of the campaign's success could be attributed to the fact that the development team had released a pre-alpha demo of the game to give potential backers an idea for the kind of visual fidelity and gameplay mechanics they could expect. It was an impressive demo at that, giving many backers confidence that the risk of investing in this ambitious project would pay off handsomely. But fast forward to February 16th, 2018, over a year and a half after the game's successful funding, and backers were greeted with this unfortunate update titled, "Sometimes you need to take a step back in order to take 2 steps forward," in which the developers confirmed that they have put the team on hiatus while they reassess their path and return to their vision. So how did this project go from successful crowdfunding paired with an impressive pre-alpha build to a full-on temporary halting of the game's development? Well, let's start by assessing just what exactly this game was supposed to be. The Kickstarter page states, quote, "System Shock is a complete remake of the genre-defining classic from 1994, rebuilt from the ground up with a Unity engine." Then, if we scroll down to the Features tab, one of the bullet points reads, "A modern take on System Shock, a faithful reboot. It's not Citadel Station as it was, but as you remember it. Many improvements, overhauls, and changes are being implemented to capture the spirit of what the original game was trying to convey and bring it to contemporary gamers." In other words, this was advertised as being a faithful remake of the original game, enhanced with modern technology and improved gameplay. But following the success of the Kickstarter campaign, many got the sense that the developers began straying from their original vision and chewing on more than they could swallow. The first major cause for concern occurred on March 1st, 2017, when Night Dive Studios released an update announcing that they would be changing game engines from Unity to Unreal. While the decision was made towards the end of October 2016, they wanted to make a vertical slice of the game with Unreal that they could show first before making the announcement. As for the reason for the change, they cited that a big part of it had to do with wanting to bring the game to consoles and have it perform and look adequately. A valid concern, I suppose, but here was one major problem. When people saw the video that Night Dive Studios had put together of the game running on Unreal Engine, it looked bland, generic, and uninteresting compared to the Unity build. A lot of people really liked how the Unity version seemed to have this blend of modern lighting and models combined with somewhat pixelated textures, giving it a look that was something of an atmospheric cross between old school and contemporary. But Unreal Engine just made the game look like your typical bland Unreal game, like something already seen. While the overall graphical fidelity was improved and shinier, a unique visual flair and grittiness was sacrificed. This culminated in backlash from backers who began to worry that the developers were moving away from the remake and art style that was originally promised. A week later, on March 8, 2017, Night Dive Studios released another update in response to criticisms against the Unreal footage of the game. The update quickly emphasized that the initial goal was to ensure that Unreal could do what they wanted it to do with crisper graphics, and that they'll be iterating on the art style and mood of the game later. It was also pointed out how the Unreal Engine video represented 1.5 months of direct content creation, whereas the Unity demo represented about 6 months of work, assuring that the Unreal gameplay video is still early work and citing how much more efficient workflow is with Unreal. Now, despite Night Dive's best attempts to appease backers, their answer to the FAQ, "What does faithful reboot mean? What are you changing from Shock 1?" really didn't sit well with many backers. Here's what they said. "When we started working on this game, we had a few choices. Initially, we were planning on doing a straight one-to-one remake, but we soon realized this would be our opportunity to introduce the Shock universe to a new generation of gamers that might have missed the opportunity to appreciate Shock. After having numerous meetings with the original Shock 1 devs about the story, levels, etc., it became clear there were a lot of things they would have done differently. So what's different? We are changing very little of the story other than refining the dialogue and plugging plot holes. Gameplay will be different, but more of an evolution of the original to get combat feeling more reactive and systems with an expected level of depth." Again, a lot of these changes come down to understanding what Looking Glass Studios would do if they were making Shock 1 anew today. Levels will harken back to the original game thematically, but the layout will see a pretty big change to apply modern level design principles for pacing and exploration. We are not going to dumb things down, but we also don't want to ignore the last 20 years of progress level design has made. Despite Night Dive Studios' best intentions, the impression that backers got from the update was that the developers were changing too much or streamlining significant elements for the sake of appealing to modern-day gamers rather than remaining true to what System Shock was and appealing to fans of the original who funded this project in the first place. It started to feel like this project was becoming a System Shock reimagining rather than a remake, a contrast to what was promised in the Kickstarter campaign, which stated, quote, "a complete remake of the genre-defining classic from 1994 and a modern take on System Shock, a faithful reboot." Concerns only deepened after Night Dive Studios released their April 2017 update, which featured 2 screenshots showing generic and shallow environmental concept art. These images only reaffirmed concerns that the studio was prioritizing bland photorealism over compelling art style, leading backers to worry that this remake would capture very little of the unique visual nuances offered by the original System Shock. Despite anxiety from backers, the development on the project pushed onwards. In May 2017, the studio released a dev diary update that provided some insight into how audio is being designed for the game. In June 2017, the studio released an update recapping their E3 2017 experience, which offered no real new information. In July 2017, the studio released another dev diary update, this time detailing level design. In this update, level designer James Henley hinted at some major changes, stating, quote, "The purpose of a reboot is to leverage an existing foundation while still allowing the freedom to re-envision, clarify, or otherwise expand upon a work. You could view it as building a new body to house an old soul. Much of my work involves translating old intentions and bringing them forward to work in tandem with the technology and principles we have today. My goal is to create a believable world space that retains System Shock's original sense of exploration and freedom." Once again, all this talk about changing the original and reimagining significant elements of it didn't sit well with backers, leading them to express that this wasn't the game that they had signed up for. To make matters worse, at this point, it had been a year since the successful funding of the Kickstarter campaign, and yet backers still had no idea how far along the game's development development had come or what the game's development timeline looked like. The Kickstarter page suggested a release window of December 2017, but at this point, there was no indication that the project would meet that deadline. From there was silence from the studio for 3 whole months until they finally published an update on October 20th, 2017. Unfortunately, the update didn't have much to offer beyond a selfie with Warren Spector, a piece of environmental concept art, and a clip showing an animation loop for a mutant. At this point, backers knew that something just wasn't right, with many feeling as though too little progress had been made for the year and 3 months that had passed since the Kickstarter's successful funding. Fears only worsened with the November update, through which the developers confirmed that they were still only in the vertical slice and pre-production stages of development. On the matter of release date, all they had to say was, quote, "We are still in early development. Once we enter our production stage, we'll have more info for all of you." The update also presented a backer update video showing gameplay footage of an early build of the game running on Unreal Engine featuring developer commentary, but it did little to alleviate dissatisfaction over how the vertical slice presented looked too far removed from the source material. Many backers cited that in its current state, the remake looked too clean and sterile, with a focus on realism coming at the expense of the gritty techno-horror cyberpunk feel that made the original game so compelling and atmospheric. From there, 2 more months of silence would pass before an update was finally published on January 24th, 2018, featuring another backer update video with developer commentary. This time, the focus was on showing off how the game's various concept art were being created, but by then, backers had little patience for looking at more artwork. A year and a half into the Kickstarter campaign, what they really wanted to see were signs of tangible progress in the game's development, signs that the game had finally moved beyond the conceptual and pre-production stages and into the full production stage, and that they were striving to improve the regressed generic visuals that resulted from the change in game engine. But instead, the following month, they would be greeted with affirmations of their worst fears. On February 16th, 2018, Night Dive Studios released an update communicating that development on the game wasn't going as well as they were letting on, while announcing that the project was going on hiatus. Here's what CEO Stephen Kick had to say. "Maybe we were too successful, maybe we lost our focus. The vision began to change. We moved from a remaster to a completely new game. We shifted engines from Unity to Unreal, a choice that we don't regret and one that has worked out for us. With the Switch, we began envisioning doing more, but straying from the core concepts of the original title. As our concept grew and as our team changed, so did the scope of what we were doing, and with that, the budget for the game. As the budget grew, we began a long series of conversations with potential publishing partners. The more that we worked on the game, the more we wanted to do, and the further we got from the original concepts that made System Shock so great. Ultimately, the responsibility for the decisions rests with me, as the CEO and founder of Night Dive Studios, a company that was built on the restoration of the System Shock franchise. I let things get out of control. I can tell you that I did it for the right reasons, that I was totally committed to making a great game, but it has become clear to me that we took the wrong path, that we turned our backs on the very people who made this possible, our Kickstarter backers. I have put the team on a hiatus while we reassess our path so that we can return to our vision. We are taking a break, but not ending the project. Please accept my personal assurance that we will be back and stronger than ever. System Shock is going to be completed and all of our promises fulfilled." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is as far as this cautionary Kickstarter tale goes for now. From where I'm sitting, it was right around the time that Night Dive Studios decided to steer away from the pre-alpha Unity engine demo that the project began to go awry. The studio began to lose sight of what they originally set out to do with their Kickstarter campaign. They began to chew on bigger and more ambitious goals than they could swallow, and they strayed off the beaten path. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that they raised much more money than they anticipated, and they let that get to their heads. I find that for some reason, crowdfunding game developers tend to want to scale the ambition of their projects to match the level of funding that they received, when all they have to do is make what they plainly advertise to contributors in the most efficient way possible. It's a trap that has afflicted many Kickstarter campaigns, and unfortunately in their eagerness, Night Dive Studios fell for it as well. Now, I don't think that Night Dive Studios was ill-intentioned, nor will I say that this System Shock Remake Kickstarter project is a disaster on the level of something like Mighty No. 9 or Untold Stories. Not yet, at least. The developers seemingly realize their mistakes, they are regrouping, reeling it back in, and there might be potential for recovery. But at the same time, it's hard not to get the sense that Night Dive Studios may have no idea what they're doing and may be ill-suited to helm a remake of such importance and magnitude. Not to mention that their decision to retreat and take a hiatus instead of correcting course immediately doesn't make for a good impression. I guess only time will tell if they'll be able to get out of the hole that they dug themselves in. I honestly pray that they do, because the idea of a faithful System Shock remake is an incredibly compelling one. I'd like nothing more than for such an endeavor to succeed. At the same time though, maybe it's just me, but I am starting to get some very bad vibes from all of this. It's all too reminiscent of infamous Kickstarter projects that spun out of control and turned into glorified scams that I've covered in the past. The jury's still out though, and I hope that my pessimistic gut instincts are wrong about this one. But until Night Dive Studios get their shit sorted out, backers have all the right to be pissed and express their disdain towards how such an exciting project was mishandled. The studio will have a lot to prove to win back the trust of disillusioned backers and fans of the original 1994 System Shock. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy my content, consider supporting me on Patreon. It is completely optional, but donating even as little as $1 a month will go a long way in helping this channel grow. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.